Hopefully everybody had a refreshing break. We just have one more session before the evening reception. So we call this the Farbulator Enterprise Narrative. So instead of providing you demos, more demos, last year we took this track where we created this fictitious company called Farbulator Industries. And the Farbulator company has a variety of roles here that will take we'll take you through a little bit of a storyline to see how this kind of concept of knowledge-aware engineering interacts with a couple different engineering processes, okay? So to kick it off here, right now, we've got Kurt and Jimmy. Now, Kurt is an engineering manager from another team. I'm sorry, Kurt. Man, it's been a long morning. Okay, so Kurt represents an engineering manager from another team within his company. Jimmy is a Farbulator engineer from a different department that's been very successful with implementation of knowledge-aware engineering. And we actually see this kind of thing happening all the time. So Kurt is very interested in learning why this team likes knowledge-aware engineering and why they're doing it. So this is the bottom-up organic growth that we typically experience in large companies. One group says, hey, that looks cool, let me try that, okay? So this is Kurt. Kurt is the manager from a different team. Jimmy's helping Kurt understand how his current Farbulator design process can be improved through the knowledge-aware technique. Take it away, fellas. Oh, yeah.
Good? All right.
Hello? Working? Good? Okay. So, hey Jimmy, thanks for meeting with me today. I know I sent you some documents last week, but I'm just eager to see how those documents can be utilized inside of Auros.
All right, good to meet with you, Kurt. I did receive those documents, and it's right here. And what I did was I decomposed the entire document into Auros. I broke it down into these granular units of knowledge, and then created knowledge packets out of those granular units. And what this conversion is going to allow you to do is to make your design process active, more easily shared, and it's going to provision the knowledge to the right people at the right time.
Well, that all sounds great, but I don't see how my documents can fit into these knowledge packets. All of our documents are in different formats, different styles. For example, since you have my document up, if you scroll down, there's a wall thickness section in there. How does something like this wall thickness section, fit inside one of these Kpaks?
Okay, that's a good question, Kurt. So I broke this section down into individual knowledge packets. As you can see, this particular area is a succinct, granular unit of knowledge. Within Auros, this is what it looks like. You have a Kpak title, description describing the knowledge. We have a multimedia section helping the engineers understand some supporting information regarding the knowledge. So what this does for you is it creates a similar format across workflows so that when engineers are tasked with finding this knowledge, it's a consistent, digestible format for them to digest the knowledge.
Well, that's pretty great, but that's a pretty easy one. What if it contains numerical boundaries or has some complex equations? Like if you scroll a little further down in my document, there's another section in there on bosses. How would something like this bosses section turn into a knowledge packet? Okay,
so is this the section you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so I also broke this down into a knowledge packet. As you can see, there's some values that are being represented here. Within this document, it's actually just static, and you're relying on engineers to actually do their own equations here. But within Auros, similar to the previous knowledge packet, we have this digestible format, multimedia images, but I included a value table. And a value table in Auros creates a functional model of the knowledge. So rather than asking engineers, whether or not they meet or fail a particular criteria, we can have them select their particular values and assess whether or not they meet the standard of knowledge. So I'm going to select my material as aluminum, my nominal wall thickness is 10, and then my base boss wall thickness will be, say, 5 millimeters. When I hit resolve, not reset, sorry. Type that in, I hit resolve, and it tells me that I'm passing this particular piece of knowledge. If I change this to say 7, as you can see, it'll tell me whether or not I'm meeting the standard. So I'm not saying, your engineers aren't saying that they're passing or failing, they're putting in their values, and Auros is returning them a pass-fail representation.
Well, it's pretty awesome, but one of the issues we're facing right now is how do I search and find this information? Right now we're using SharePoint. It takes me days to find the right information, or most of the time I give up and just use whatever I can find on my computer. So is there an easy way to search and find the specific information that I need?
Yes. So Auros has this function called extended elements, and it's how we tag the knowledge to be representative of different areas of knowledge. So for this particular Kpac, I created an extended element of type housing, of component feature bosses, because it has to do with bosses of Farbulator housing. It has to do with material type, so I tagged it with aluminum, gray cast iron, magnesium, steel. And as you mentioned to me previously, this particular piece of knowledge is relevant in the design verification phase. So I also created an extended element for that. In addition, I created a Kpac type. As mentioned in the document, it's a design standard. So if we go back to our document, I see I highlighted the areas in the document where I created these extended elements. Okay.
Well, that's great that I can categorize the information, but that doesn't explain how I actually search for it. So, if I'm actually looking for that specific Kpac or a specific, set of knowledge, how do I actually perform the search?
Okay, so if I go into my Farbulator community and I list all of the pieces of knowledge within it, this will have stuff about, Farbulator housings, Farbulator connectors, bosses. But if I want to pull back only the stuff to do with Farbulator housings, particularly my design standards, I'm going to click on my design standards and my housing. And what these filters are, these are actually the extended elements that I showed you within the Kpac. So these values, by selecting them, will return to me that entire set of knowledge that previously was in your static document. So what I did for you is that I created what we call a knowledge set. So a knowledge set allows us to dynamically collect these Kpacs so that you don't have to perform the search every time. You can just go over to the list of all sets, and you can see that this filter string is filtering on housing and product design standards. So by clicking on this set, it automatically provisions you with the knowledge you need for product design standards of Farbulator housings.
Okay, that's awesome. I can see that you got all my information into the system now. But how does this actually work with our product development process? I sent you that document that kind of explains the process. How do we incorporate that knowledge into our product development process?
Okay, Kurt, so this is the document that you sent to me. It's in a PDF. There's very little information. It doesn't seem like it would be very useful to your engineers. It's passive. It doesn't give you any guidelines at each step of the way. What I did for you is I put this in to Auros, and we have this concept of a method Kpac. And a method Kpac allows you to capture a workflow and make it dynamic. So what this allows you to do is, as your engineers are going through the design verification stage, they're provisioned with these knowledge sets at each step of the way. So as your engineer is going through your product design standards, you can go, it's provisioning me with all of those knowledge packets that I previously showed you at this particular step.
So that's all great that the information is there and it's at the right steps, but how do I actually evaluate it? You know, how do my engineers attest that they're complete or that they've met any of those standards or requirements?
Okay, so as your engineer goes through the product design standards, they're gonna open this set and create what we call an assessment. So I'm gonna create the assessment control. This is setting the context of the project. I have a project code. We can put in, you know, a Farbulator type and customer name. I'm going to generate the assessment control. So this is where your engineers will actually attest to whether or not their projects meet these standards that we've put into the system. So they can do things like say I'm passing, I'm failing. By manually clicking these, they can open up the links to see if what the knowledge is actually trying to convey to them. If we look over here, this is our Farbulator Kpis that we just recently saw. If we open it up, we can see this is the boss dimensions that you were curious about earlier. What we can do in the assessment is actually execute the value table. So I'm going to pick the same values that I did before and hit resolve, and it's going to tell me that I'm passing. Okay. And the great thing about this is that while your engineers are going through this process of evaluating their project, I can close out this assessment. You can come to this method assessment at any time. You hover over this assessment card, and it'll give you the health of the project at that step. So if I hover over here, we can see that there's 32 pieces of knowledge that haven't been evaluated, and that there's 3 that conform and 2 that are non-compliant. So in one simple hover over, you can see the health of your project.
Well, hot diggity dog, Jimmy. That's one of the best things I've ever seen. Auros can do everything, man. It's awesome, it's great, it's amazing, it's stunning. Thanks for meeting with me and showing me all the cool things that Auros can do, man.
All right, it was a pleasure, Kurt. Thanks.
Kurt, I had no idea you were such a ham. Okay, so a couple things in surmise. So a lot just happened there, and it was coming at you quick. So let me just go back a little bit. So you saw a document, a specification document. How many people have seen specification documents like that, right? We've all seen them. And how many have used those to do design engineering, right? We all have, right? What you need is on page 29, paragraph 2, right? Or, you know, it's just completely not a convenient. It's great for the author, but it's terrible for everybody else, right? And for everybody else, that's where the real value is. So, you know, that's one thing right off the bat. So routinely when we work with customers, we do quite often decompose, start with those documents and create knowledge packets from them. Another interesting thing you saw in that vignette is that the knowledge was broken down into knowledge packets, but then the manager, Kurt, asked, well, how do I know where and how this gets, you know, put into play? And for the first time today, we saw something called a different kind of knowledge packet. We saw a method knowledge packet, which is another kind of model, but now it's a process model. It's visualized like a video, right? And then you saw this idea of a collection, a smart collection called a set, collecting knowledge packets on the fly. If a new one's authored tomorrow, it's just going to show up there because of the smart collection, pick it up by whatever criteria is there, and inject it into that step in the method. And then when the assessment was created in the method, the whole team can see exactly what's there in that step, and even the pie chart showing exactly the status of all that knowledge within there. And it's completely free, real time in terms of visualization, right? No one has to go say, what's your status? It's all just there. So thank you guys. That was great demo. We'll move on now to the second vignette. And so that introduces Chris. Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
Just wondering on the assessment side of it, from a quality aspect, and you go through the program, you have multiple quality checks. Are you able to do an assessment at time, say where you're at, and then do another assessment later? Are they the same event?
Oh yeah, yep. So we have a special visualization for that called a progression report, which actually lines up the changes in status of a given criteria across milestone events or across timing events. So yeah, I mean that's definitely part and parcel.
Full assessment of one part related to all the quality characteristics.
Right, and then matrices with the events. Right, and then you get all these quadrants of color and changes. Hopefully you're seeing red going to green as you go left to right. yeah, that's what we hope. Great question. Any other questions? Okay, Kurt remains the manager, right, Kurt? Yep. Chris is a CAD manager, and Evan is a designer on his team. So Evan, you're the designer. Chris, you're the CAD manager. Yeah. Kurt, now excited about his new knowledge of knowledge-aware engineering, has come to Chris to learn about how can we take it a step further, and how can his new knowledge packets that came out of that static, lame document and interact directly with the modeling environment. So we're going to talk about a little bit of CAD integration here. So take it away, fellas.
I need your mic.
Jeff. Oh.
All right, so thanks for meeting with me today, Chris. I just saw one of the best demos I've ever seen of what Auros can do. Now I'd like to see how well it works with some of our own models. I've heard you've been doing some work in NX, and I was hoping you can show me a couple things.
Sure. We've been working with Jimmy, and Jimmy's team helped us break these Kpis down. Evan has been working on his new design of the Farbulator. Here we're looking at a model that he created in NX, and with this particular model, we've integrated it with design rules using the Auros connector. So if we scroll down in the part navigator, you can see where these design rules are listed here. Some are showing as red, some are showing as green. The red ones are ones that we're not yet compliant with. The green ones are ones where Evan has changed the geometry of the part so that we now conform with that rule. And there are a few here that are showing as unlinked. These are ones where we need it within the rule to create a mapping from Auros into this CAD part to create that alignment. Each of these rules is allocated into the model dynamically and continuously. So as new rules are added to the Auros knowledge base, they'll show up in this model tree automatically. So let's drill down and show you underneath the hood how this integration is happening. So here we have the Auros connector, the icons on the home tab. And this model can be integrated either with a knowledge set within Auros, which contains a collection of Kpis, or it can be integrated with an assessment. So in this case, we want to evaluate each one of these design rules and save the results of whether or not we conform or don't conform, and save that up to an assessment. So here, we've linked in assessment 4080. And we'll open up to the other window in Auros. Alt-tab. And we can see within this product design review assessment, there's a variety of different Kpis here. Some come from the design community, some from tooling, some from casting. Each one of these is published and made active using the review and approval processes that are pre-configured within those communities of practice. Some of these are evaluated with an interface to the CAD model, and some of these are evaluated manually based on other aspects of the design. But we're going to take a closer look at this one Kpis, Farbulator 25, as it's integrated in with our CAD model. So this particular CAD check has to do with the height of the mounting bosses that are on our Farbulator. There's a cover that's not shown here that needs to align with this particular part. And so the height of these mounting bosses needs to be within a specific range, 35 to 40 millimeters. So if the mounting bosses are too short, then the cover is too close. It doesn't, the gap isn't sufficient between our Farbulator and our cover. If the gap is too wide, then our cover doesn't sufficiently attach onto our Farbulator here. So we've implemented this design rule as a value table. And if we click over to the lightning bolt icon here, we can test this rule and make sure that it works properly before we've integrated it within our CAD system. So if we enter in, for example, 33 millimeters, and we go to resolve this, we'll notice we not only get pass or fail, but we get a status message that provides additional information. This information can be used in the integration to provide new data or additional information back to the designer. So you'll notice when we run this rule, there's a parameter called mounting feature height that's set. This is one of the parameters within our CAD model that was showing as unlinked. So we'll go back over to our Auros connector in the CAD model, and we'll show you how we create that association. We open up the Auros connector again. We click this Show Parameters. In the upper panel here, right, we see matched parameters. These are parameters that have already been aligned between the CAD model and the Auros assessment. And here we see the value as shown in Auros, which could be blank here, but also the value in the model. So these parameters, what this is showing here is that these are bidirectional. So we can take values that are set by a particular Kpack or a value table in Auros and use that to provide default values to a model that are then changed within that model and then sent back up to Auros for evaluation. Down in the unmatched section, we can see our mounting feature height. This was the parameter that needed to be aligned. And we see a couple other parameters here also that are part of our assessment that need to be created in our CAD model. We could have created each one of these manually, but with one click of a button in the Auros connector, we can create all of these unmatched parameters in our model. Once we've created the parameters in our model, we can now close out of this. And then we'll click OK there. Once this parameter is created with our model, we can associate it with an aspect of the geometry. So this particular rule, we know it pertains to our mounting feature height. And so what Avin is going to do is he's going to open up the NX expression tree, and he's going to associate that parameter with the mounting bosses. Specifically, he's going to create a measurement from the top of the mounting boss to the base. He's doing this with the measurement in this demo, but this could have just as easily been done with a dimension within NX using the sketch. And you'll see that once he creates this association, so we see the mounting feature height and it's aligned with this identifier within the CAD system. We click OK here. And what you'll see when he scrolls down in the part navigator, because we know that feature has a height of 30 millimeters, that it's too short. So the rule shows up as red. And the status message that we had configured in the value table shows up here. So this is the first thing a designer is going to look at. When they see one of these rules fail, they'll mouse over this comment section to find out why the rule failed. Furthermore, if they need additional information to figure out how to resolve this, they can right-click, ask for more information, and they'll be directed directly to the Kpack that implements that design rule. Going back to our model, now that Avin knows what he needs to do to bring his model in alignment, he's going to increase the height of this extrude. So he's going to change it from 30 to 35. And once this model finishes and it updates and he scrolls down, we'll see that that rule changes from red to green.
Whoa, 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 wait a minute here, Chris. So you mean to tell me that every time something that causes a dimension to change, the rule check will automatically happen and I'll be able to see that without asking my designers to recheck the part?
Yep, absolutely. Everything's dynamic and continuous when we integrate with the Auros knowledge base.
Well, hot dog, that's amazing.
So the last aspect of this evaluation, right? So we've adjusted our geometry in the CAD model. The next thing that we want to do, right, is publish this value up to Auros. So if we go back to our Auros connector, and we'll go back to the parameter window where we showed the values that are in the CAD system. Here we can see the value in the model is 35, but the value hasn't yet been written up to the assessment. So with one click of a button, we can update the assessment from our model. And this is publishing these values back up to our assessment. Yep. And now if we come back to our assessment in Auros and take a look at that particular line item, refresh here. We'll see that first line item that was previously unfilled. Now it turns green and now this passes.
So wait a minute here, Chris. It looks like only a single measurement was evaluated to that line item. You know the configuration of our next version of the Farbulator will have 4 pairs of mounting bosses. Can I check all of those with the same design rule?
Yep, we can certainly reuse this rule. So on the assessment, we also have another view called the parameter layout. And if we click over to there, this is going to show all of the parameters in all of the value tables that are listed within this assessment. If we go find the one for our mounting feature height, right, we can see that there's one instance there that's already set to 35. If we right click, we can add an additional parameter instance. We'll call this boss 2. Yep. And now if we scroll down right in this interface, this is exactly how our assessment integrates with your CAD model, is the CAD model provides the inputs. And here, what we can go ahead and test this by putting another value in here. And we can see evaluation of our new boss. It fails, but also it rolls up to, we have a rolled up status that's also showing as red right above the 35. That's showing that somewhere within one of our checks with the bosses, one of them is out of alignment. So what we would do is if you had 4 pairs in your new design, we would create 4 instances of this parameter. Alternatively, if each one of those bosses needed to be evaluated, perhaps there's one instance that needs to be within a different range. We could create a different Kpack that would be assessed as a different line item. And so we can have multiple parameters and multiple line items within our assessment that can flexibly address whatever you need in your model.
Well, I'm going to say it one more time, Chris. Hot dog. Auros can really, truly do everything. Thanks for meeting with me today and showing me all the cool stuff Auros can do.
All right. Okay, so I promised in the last vignette that we can create the assessment, we can provision the knowledge, you get this visibility, you get the flow through, but we can also automate. So a couple things, just the ability to automate the evaluation of lots of knowledge all at once by connecting to digital environments. Here was NX. How many companies here use NX? Okay, about a third, right? And so probably the rest is CATIA, Pro-E. Yep, guess what? It works exactly the same way. I'll say one thing I don't like about this demo is that the interface here is a lot of clicks. Doesn't have to be. All those clicks can be taken out. We have a version that's called, we call it the silent connector. Basically, the updates and all that stuff happen automatically instead of asking the end user to click. So the other thing here is I want to ask, how many companies in their design process, looking at design engineers here, create parameter sheets separately? Right? There's a few, right? Of course. Isn't that ridiculous, right? You got a parameter sheet here, and you got a design guide over here in standards manual, and you're creating the parameter sheet from the design guide and then trying to keep them synchronized? What the heck? That's not lean. Okay, here the parameter sheets are created dynamically, and the windows of opportunity for a specific parameter are calculated based on the worst case condition. It's like a tolerant stack up, only for engineering standards. Where's my window of opportunity for particular engineering? Now here we're doing it CAD-wise. It doesn't have to be CAD. This could be a process model. It could be an attribute model. It could be a quality model. It could be all kinds. It could be a financial model. It doesn't have to be CAD. I think we all understand CAD. It's nice to look at. So this is a CAD-specific demo, but this idea of connecting the models is not a CAD-specific concept. We can automate, once knowledge is represented as models, hey man, we can automate to the cows come home. So that's a powerful technique. Yes?
How is it linked to the CAD model itself in the background? Because we have customers that change their part number all the time, so if it's based on part number, it won't be linked.
It's not part number. The answer to your question, though, is kind of like my last answer, is that it really depends on the situation. We generally categorize model interaction in 3 categories: freeform, parametric, and custom. So there's 3 different interaction models. What you just saw, more or less, was freeform. You got a model, and the Auros said, hey, boss height's important. The connector created this parameter, and then he was obligated to connect it to a measure. And that measure is now dynamic. Even if it was a surface replace, the measure would update, and Auros would be updated and evaluate real time, whether the knowledge packet changed or the dimension changed. It's compatible.
And I do
Yeah.
see that,
Yep.
but my concern is when I design off-site, they bring in the new model, the new part number, they drop it in to do the assessment. How do they know that assessment goes with that part because they did it?
It's associated by that ID, that assessment ID. Yeah, it's not by part number. There's a unique ID created for the assessment, and then you can port that ID is portable. Not only can you assess a CAD file, you can assess multiple CAD files with a single assessment if you wanted to. I don't know that I've seen that done, but you can. So let's say you decided you wanted to port that same assessment to a new version, and the part name completely changed. No problem. Just insert the ID.
Just because of the free form, I realize it's now linked to something special. That's why I want to know how.
Oh, the measure, you'd have to recreate the measures.
Every time?
Only if that model completely changed and it's a new bottom-up model. But for example, in a case in hybrids, none of this is cut and dry, right? In a hybrid situation, let's say you built a bunch of your design on top of, I did closures at one time in my life, right? So you got a styled surface, changes all the time, and you're building a hood under panel to give it torsional rigidity, right? I built my nice structure, it's you know, it won't oil can, all that good stuff, and then all of a sudden the studio tells me I got a new surface, right? So we replace the surface, and maybe some of my beam structure adjusts. Okay, those measures survive. Now, if an edge disappears or something like that, I mean, the CAD guys know what I'm talking about. You know, those things can happen, then you have to do minor amount of repair. But generally, it's robust to those kinds of ins and outs of parts. Now, if you take and you want a whole brand new and you're starting from scratch, you got to redo the measures. Yeah, in those cases, you do. But a lot of companies now have seed parts, smart parts. Then it doesn't matter, right? Because now it's connecting not to the geometry measure, but it's actually to the parametrics, to a named relationship, which is a member of the seed part. So as long as you're still using a seed part, you can go from seed part to seed part, and everything just works. Any other questions? Generally, the CAD stuff generates a lot of questions. Okay, we're going to move on to Vignette 3. Thank you, guys. Okay. For Vignette 3 of 4, we need Steve Boisvert, Sean McEvely. And Jimmy Roboleski. Okay. So Steve and Sean are quality engineers at Farbulator Enterprise, and Jimmy is a design engineer. Jimmy's getting his computer ready. The quality team will take us through the various maturity levels of organizational learning, ultimately provisioning knowledge back to the design team from the quality team.
Is that good?
Think so? Yep.
Hey man, check it out. We just got our new prototype of our Farbulator. At least I think it's a Farbulator. Kind of looks like a third grade art class project.
Yeah, it's close enough. All right, well, yeah, let's take a look, see what kind of quality we got for the part.
Let's measure this thing up. Oh man, I'm starting to see some defects already.
Yeah, that doesn't look good.
If we're seeing defects like this, just on the surface like that, buddy, we should run these against our critical to quality checks.
All right, yeah, why don't we just bring up our assessment, and we'll run through all the CTQs and critical qualities.
So you start going through them, I'll measure the defects, and we'll get this done right away.
All right, so let's see, the first thing we see, does the casting have any surface imperfections? Anything like pinholes or any sort of?
Absolutely. I can see them right now. They're right here by the slot.
All right, yeah, that does look like a problem. We gotta get that figured out.
You know what? I have my handy dandy little clipboard here. I'll write that problem down. I'll go find Jimmy and we'll get this resolved.
No worries, rather than worrying about that, we'll just put it right in the system. We can just raise an issue from the assessment.
What do you mean raise an issue from the assessment?
So we have this community configured already. So as we're evaluating this, we go to our first requirement here, and we're going to score this red. So as soon as we do that, the system's going to let us know that we need to raise an issue. So there's a complete issue management system built right into Auros that we can tie right to the assessments.
So we'll have traceability from the assessment directly to the issue?
Yep, we'll be able to see all of that right from the issue. So here we have a template of a standard issue. So we're raising a quality issue right now. A couple of the main elements of here. So we need to score the priority of this.
We're still pretty early in the design phase, so let's make that medium.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I know Jimmy's kind of the expert when it comes to this, so why don't we assign him the issue? He'll get notified of this, and we can proceed from there. So Steve, I'm assuming you probably want to be kept in the loop as we're going through the resolution of this issue.
Yeah, I'd like to see any updates that happen on this issue.
All right, so what we're going to do, we'll add you as an interested party. So anything that happens with this issue, you know, it's the status change or the resolution, you'll be included on all that. All right, so we got the people that are included on the issue. So let's go ahead and just include our description of what actually happened.
Yeah, so let Jimmy know that there's pinholes found near the slot feature on our prototype A. And he needs to investigate the root cause.
All right, we don't have a root cause, so we'll tell Jimmy, like you said, investigate root cause. All right. So, like you had asked, you know, tying that information from the assessment to the issue. So we have similar attributes on here. So it's already going ahead and pulling all the information from the assessment.
So it was smart enough to know from the assessment to fill out all this information on the issue?
Yep, all the stuff was on the assessment. So what region it came from, the risk category, prototype, all that stuff's right there with the direct link back to the assessment as well as the actual knowledge packet or requirement that this came about.
So see down there, we can add attachments. Can I take a snapshot and send that to you, and you can send that to Jimmy?
Yep, we can include any sort of documents or screenshots, whatever you want, in order to categorize this issue.
All right, I'm going to send you one right now.
All right. So we got that. I stored that locally here. So we're going to browse and find that image that you sent.
Or any issue image would be fine right now.
All right. Sorry about that. So we're going to load that image that you just sent. So here we can see now this image is attached to the issue. So when Jimmy gets this, he's going to be able to see the actual surface finish on that part. So we'll go ahead and save and close. It's going to trigger an email to everyone. Now Jimmy will know what's going on and that we've been having some problems with these parts.
That's pretty cool, because if I wrote it down, I'd probably forget to go tell him anyway. So this saves us a lot of time.
Exactly. Well, that's about all we can do now. I guess it's Jimmy's problem now.
Let's
Wanna go lunch?
Well, we could go to lunch. Or we can continue to evaluate our assessment. There's a lot more issues on this than just that one.
All right, well, you gonna go through the rest?
Jimmy's sleeping.
All right.
All right. Hit your email.
There we go. All right, so remember that issue we had a little while back? So it looks like Jimmy responded to it, the one relating to the pinholes in the part. So let's take a look and open up that issue, see what happened.
Let's open on the assessment.
All right, well, let's take a look. We got our issue right here.
You need his mouse.
This one works a little better. All right, so my setback, but now I just need to find my assessment. So I can easily go to, here's the project name. So we'll do a quick search, get back into my assessment. So now on that assessment, we have, the image is actually attached right to this line item. So since it was raised from here, it knows that it's going to put it right into the line. So we'll open this up to take a look at the issue. So now we can see Jimmy's been in here working on this issue. We can see all the history of it. So we can see that today he updated this, updated the description on the issue. So his resolution was to decrease the mold temperature by 10% for the rest of the prototype runs. I'm changing the wall thickness transitions to increase material flow. So that should work for us.
So what should we do with that CTQ?
So if we go back into the assessment, let's just go ahead and score that yellow for now. The issue hasn't been resolved yet. Damn it, it's locked on that. So we'll score it yellow. Still needs to be resolved, but Jimmy's working on the product.
All right. Check it out. We have prototype B. It looks like those fixes that Jimmy put in place really did the trick. So now what would happen since the problem's resolved?
So now we can go. All right, so the issue is still there in Auros. So we have complete traceability of everything that has happened with the issue. Now we can go ahead and score our assessment green. But we still have everything in here for the issues as they took place.
That's awesome. All right. We gotta get that one unlocked, man. So you gotta log in as him or yourself. It's locked. Yeah, who logged into this one?
That's Jimmy's. Hey, can you try to get into the assessment? It'll be in there.
Now we can go Hey, Sean, have you checked the production samples of the Farbulator yet?
No, I haven't. I was just about to go through the weekly CTQs checks.
Cool, I want to see how well the new Farbcaster 2.0 has been running. Do you mind if I give you a hand?
No, not at all. Well, we got our assessment control up now. We can start going through all the checks. All right.
So what's the first check?
First one we got, any surface imperfections. So let's take a look at this.
Looks like a few. Hang on, let me get my magnifying glass because I have this too. All right. Yep, there's a few right here near the mounting features.
All right. So why don't we go ahead and see.
Didn't we have that similar issue?
I don't know. I think so. It sounds familiar, but we can find out easily enough. So all we'd have to do, we have our assessment here. So every time we go through this evaluation, we're running through this check for surface imperfections. So if we open up this knowledge packet, we have a report on the knowledge packet to run across all the occurrences. So if we run our occurrence report, it's going to show us every time that this knowledge packet was evaluated. So here we have, it's been evaluated 9 times, and we can see the status of all of those for all these different projects. As well as that, we can see any issues that came about when it was being evaluated. So why don't we go ahead and look here. So now we can see that there was an issue for this. So something that caused issues with the surface finish. And it looks like the resolution is here. And the resolution was to decrease the mold temperature by 10% for the rest of the prototypes.
You know, I think I remember that. You know, it's pretty cool that we can see the surface finish issues across all the different Farbulator projects. And I think that solution will work for us. I'll go talk to the operators and get this issue resolved. But isn't there a better way to capture these experiences so people don't have to go and search through these issues each time?
Yeah, so one thing we can do, we can create a lessons learned, and then that lessons learned, we can have so it automatically is fed into assessments for the future.
I think that's a great idea, but how do we do that?
All right, so it's just as simple as creating a knowledge packet. So if we go into our community, we're going to go ahead and create this knowledge packet or KPAC. We already have templates set up, one of which is the lessons learned. So we can predefine a little bit how we want this template to be configured. So now we're going to update our KPAC. That is going to be our lessons learned. So for the description, we have when pinholes are found. We're going to incorporate gradual wall thickness transitions and reduce material temp by 10%. Okay, so now we have our lessons learned.
We have a lesson learned, but I'm still not sure how that relates back to the issue.
So one thing we can do is we can link 2 issues. So just by doing a hashtag and then the issue ID, we can add a quick reference to where that issue was raised. So all I'm doing here is I'm having hashtag and then the issue number, apply and close, and now we'll have a link directly back to that issue. So now if we look, we have this new lessons learned created in our system. with a link right back to that issue.
That's perfect, but I still don't see how that's going to make this issue more visible in the future.
So I know what we need to do. There's just a couple of quick configuration changes. But don't worry, next time we're looking at our assessment, we'll have it there.
All right, cool. Let's call it a day. Check it out, Sean, the Mega Farbulator. Behold, the XRC 238. Can you believe it?
I can't.
This
That's pretty
thing's
awesome.
amazing. I don't even know what it does, but it just looks impressive.
It looks cool. That's all that matters.
I doubt we're going to find any type of quality issue on this, but we have to complete all of our checks anyway.
Well, let's hope so. But you know the drill. Let's bring up our assessment control and run our evaluations on this. Here's your column. Yep.
All right, well, so what is our first check?
All right, so we're looking for surface imperfections in the finished part.
I think the whole part's an imperfection, but anyway.
All right. So you're saying
So we
it's
do have surface imperfections, and I think we've run into this issue before.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. I remember you asking me to how we were going to show this in the future for the lessons learned. So we did a couple things in our community. So what we have now is we have this new column in our assessments. So this column is going to show us all of the lessons learned that pertain to the different quality checks. So if we click here, what it's doing is linking us to a set. So a set is basically a smart gathering of knowledge packets based on a specific search criteria. So we've created this, attached it to the assessment. So anytime these new lessons learned are created, it's automatically going to be added into this knowledge set that can be viewed easily for a reference.
That's really cool. What's the lessons learned say to do for our situation?
So for our situation, it says, relating to the pinholes found near transitions, incorporate a gradual wall thickness and reduce the material temperature by 10% below melting temp.
You know, I think I remember that from the last time. This new lessons learned process is pretty cool, and I like that it automatically shows up in our assessment controls, but I still think we're seeing this problem far too often. Isn't there a better way to avoid this in the future?
Yeah, I agree. You know, I think we have enough information and experience on this issue. We can go ahead and make this one of our best practices. That way we're always evaluating this rather than evaluating it earlier than later.
Yeah, let's modify this lessons learned Kpack to be a best practice.
All right, so all we're going to do, we're going to go back into the knowledge packet and edit it. Right now it's a lessons learned. We're just going to change that type. So now it's organized by a best practice. So we're going to save the knowledge packet. Now, when they're evaluating best practices, it'll be part of their assessment.
So wait, now that's a best practice, how do we communicate this to the design team?
Well, so the design team's already using Auros. So when they create their assessment, they're already going to be getting the best practices. So they'll have this already.
This sounds too good to be true. I'm going to walk over and ask Jimmy
Tell you
if
what,
he knows about this best practice.
I bet you lunch that this knowledge packet will be in his flow of work before you can tell him.
All right, deal. Yeah, you gotta switch. What's up, Jimmy? What are you up to, man?
Going on, just finishing up my design assessment.
So Sean created a new quality best practice that he says you guys should evaluate in your assessment.
Okay, well, let's take a look at it.
Well, he bet me lunch that your assessment would know about it already.
Okay. All right, let's take a look. All right, well, it looks like I do have an update on my knowledge.
Shut the front door.
Let's
Are you
see-
sure that's the right one?
I don't know, let's check it out. Well, it looks like I got 2 quality lessons learned coming my way. It looks like you might owe Sean some lunch.
That's fine. I just hope that these quality Kpaks are going to help to increase the downstream quality for our farbulators.
Yeah, so my current design process doesn't include these tapers, so probably would have had that similar issue on my project. So I'm gonna go ahead and add these to my assessment.
So that's pretty cool how we can share information from one group to another. This really shows the benefits of us being knowledge aware.
Okay, so let's take a look at what we saw there. So the quality team was going through a couple different iterations of their prototypes, and they were attempting to show in the vignette that, and it's fairly common, that you start to notice the common mistakes. First, if you record them in a digital way that's connected, what is common will be visible, okay? So the first thing is being able to quickly recognize the common mistake. And Auros does this kind of technology, and the knowledge-aware technique promotes the visibility and the connectivity, and it takes work out of the process of getting to resolution. So the common problems found. Then they decided, since it was common, to create a lessons learned. Now the lessons learned only affected them, right? So in their assessment, they found how the problem was solved, not by searching, but because the standard that they had for surface finish was taught how to find the lessons learned that were related to it. So if there were more lessons learned, they're dynamically getting collected on their standard. And it wasn't that clear, but that was how it was happening. Bob, thank you for that nice little process there. He helped us design that process. It actually works really well, okay? So now they encountered the problem. They didn't search for a solution because the common lesson learned was there. But that itself was insufficient, right? So the better way is not to have a better, faster way of solving the problem again, but to prevent it to begin with. So what they did was they changed their knowledge packet of best practice to an engineering standard, and there's a variety of different ways this can happen, but it now showed up as something, a stakeholder saying, I need this in your design process. Remember we talked about communication, it's really a better way of communicating. As soon as they did that, the design assessment, which was being used, you saw that yellow corner, right? And the yellow corner said to the design assessment, there's new knowledge out there. There's something out there available to you that applies to the context of your assessment. He clicked on it. He saw 2 new engineering standards that were available. Said, okay. The yellow went away. And they showed up for evaluation in their assessment. Nobody's going searching. No one's trying to decide or omitting. It's a connected process, and that's how you prevent recurring mistakes. So we've seen customers go through this process. How do you recognize common mistakes? How do you learn from common mistakes, and then how do you prevent them? It's generally not going from recognition directly to prevent. It generally does go through this kind of maturity process. Auros guides you that whole way through. So, or the technique actually does a good job. As long as you're creating knowledge models, because that's what you have to do, because you have to be able to identify the specific wants, specific needs. If you're dealing with documents, you can't do this, right? You got the best issues management system in the world, you can't do it. It's about the connectivity that allows you to do this. The ability to provision. So now if you're a quality guy and you see, if I create my lessons learned, I can change it to an engineering standard, it's going to show up in the process and design, that's now the preferred communication mechanism. And you're also creating organizational learning, because as you do that, the system is learning. You're creating stuff, right? And that's why it becomes not a new process or an additional effort or something to go over and, I got to create lessons learned. Now it becomes the better way of communicating stakeholders across domains. So thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate the demonstration. Questions about that? The question is, so the value table, you can manually edit the conformance state, and then you can go to the value table and process the rule, which then updates the status. So what she saw was that that particular community said, anytime we have conformance state red, you get to configure this, you must raise an issue. And you like that, right? I like it. Any other questions? Yes?
Take lessons learned from a system viewpoint, not a part viewpoint. For example, cooling performance in a vehicle, big front bumper and all that. It's not, it ties, that test phenomenon ties to multiple parts.
Right. It's actually not that much different. So if you think of your communities as hierarchical, and you may have radiator community, water pump community. I mean, if you're in the cooling loop, these are the different fluid transport, maybe your different communities, but you may have a system community, thermo-aero community that's working on, the overall system. And that community may treat the properties, the individual performance parameters of the system as properties and integrate into a rule or a Kpack at the system level.
Then you can still tie it to a multitude of parts.
You can tie it down, up and down that chain. And what is new in 8 is the systems engineering stuff we're going to show you tomorrow that will then provide you a visualization of the mapping of how parameters are cascading and touching each other. So you get to see the interactions. If I change the CFM through my radiator because I just decreased the fascia, that's going to affect what, okay? As a heat exchange person, you probably know off the top of your head, but we may be interested to know it's going to affect, the heat rejection efficiency. That's going to change the engine temperature by this kind of function. It's going to change this kind of, might affect fuel kind of, all that cascade then can be mapped. Because people are writing knowledge models that identify the parameters, and each knowledge model has a series of interactions. Those interactions can map, and then we can build the bigger map. It's actually using social graph theory. It's using the same thing that Facebook uses to map relationships. That's a view of tomorrow. Any other questions? Great question.
Just one question.
Yep.
This looks like the Kpax works pretty good with an explicit form of knowledge. Does it capture the tacit form of knowledge, and how do you put it in digital format?
That's a great question. That one's hard to answer. He's asking about tacit and explicit. Tacit knowledge is kind of hard to say, maybe hard to write down, may not have hard and fast boundary conditions. If you're a die designer, sometimes people would say that's a black art. It's kind of hard, a lot of tacit knowledge there. And my experience has been that there's no binaries here. Everything is falling on a continuum from tacit to explicit, and that which we think is tacit tends to, as we mature and better understand the system, we derive explicit knowledge from the tacit. So when I get asked this question, and this question gets asked, it's useful to create a very basic Kpack. It may not be a model, but it's just the consideration, right? I haven't been on stamping too long, but there may be some relationship that we don't fully understand that just says, the surface finish on a certain kind of body part to accommodate the die needs to be of a certain surface finish, okay? And we don't even know why. We can't boundary, we just create that and so that people can read it. It shows up in an assessment. We may not even ask people to evaluate. We have these information-only knowledge packets. They show up in the assessment, so people can just be informed. But as you become more experienced, and we experience more often, what I find is that tacit concept gets derivative explicit knowledge. And it's just, we can't create knowledge where there's not. If it's tacit, it probably means we just don't fully understand yet. That's generally what I've seen. Does that answer your question? Maybe there's some truly tacit knowledge. Playing a violin is the quintessential example of tacit knowledge. How do you define the right way to play a violin? We can have some rules about best ways to hold it, best way to move the bow. But when you actually talk about playing a violin, that's an art, right? It's very tacit, and that probably doesn't decompose. The good news is that most of us are technical and engineers, and the vast majority of the impactful things to design are way on the tacit side, or way on the explicit side. It's not like playing a violin. Long answer, sorry. Any other questions? Okay, last one before we have the evening reception. So can I invite Josh and Greg, I think? Who else is coming up? Just Josh and Greg, okay. So Greg is the new director of engineering Farbulator Enterprise. He's just been hired from a competitor, Acme Farbulator, and he's very impressed with the way knowledge-aware engineering has affected the Farbulator industries. And Josh is the KRC 238 chief engineer. That's a Farbulator engineering Farbulator. And we'll introduce Greg to the internal knowledge-aware engineering technique, the overall technique at Farbulator Enterprise.
Hi, Josh. It's nice to meet you. I've heard some great things about you. So now that I'm on board, I want to hit the ground running, and I want to get my arms around the XRC 238 Farbulator project. So what I need to do is make sure that I've got all of the design meetings, the project status meetings, and the issue status meetings on my calendar.
Okay, Greg, well, welcome. Welcome to Farbulator Enterprises, where work is a vacation. And we actually don't have to schedule all those meetings. We have a knowledge-aware engineering system that allows us to see the progress of our projects with just a click of a few buttons.
Hold on. So if we don't have any meetings scheduled, how do I know what the project status is?
Well, here, let me show you. So this is our knowledge-aware engineering system, and within it we have this module called Project Space. So if I click on that, it's going to bring up a bunch of different cards on this Project Space wall. So what these cards represent is there's one for each individual project that's going on currently at the company. So you can see that they're organized in these different swim lanes. We've got a couple of projects that are in the business development phase, one in concept verification. We've got a couple other ones here in design verification. So this particular card represents the XRC 238 project that I'm currently heading up. And all these different cards are going to give us information about each individual project. In addition to the project information on these cards, we also have the ability to show different key performance indicators on the cards themselves. So for instance, if I want to see how many open issues there are on each of my projects, I just switch the configuration, and now this is going to show me that there are 2 projects that are in business development don't have any issues, so that's good. They're early on in the process. There's a few issues here going on in this project in concept verification. If we keep going down, we've got some design verification projects that have some issues. Our max power XRC 238 project only has 1 current open issue, so we're doing good in the max power project. We've got a couple other ones that have some issues, but we also have the ability to take some of these metrics and turn them into customized risk scores. So here at Farbulator, we've configured our own risk score. So for our projects, the higher the number, the lower the risk. So we can see here that our business development projects, they've got high scores, so they're in the green. They don't really have any problems going on right now. Our Pluto project is also in the green. It's probably getting close to that yellow. 75, I think, is the yellow mark. And then as we go back over here, we can come down and see that our max power project is at 81. So our risk score being calculated with the different assessment control evaluations and the issues that we have open right now is coming out in the green. So we're in good shape.
Wow, that's fantastic. We sure could have used this over at Acme. I mean, to be able to see your project health with just a couple of clicks is fantastic. Okay, so now that we know that the project is pretty well on track and the risk level is low, we're going to have to schedule some design meetings to get down into lower level details so we can really get our arms around the project.
More meetings, more meetings. We don't have to schedule meetings around here. We can actually click into the project card itself and we can get details about what's happening on the project right now. So if I click on this team board card, it's going to bring up the first wall that we see is going to be this Gantt calendar. So it's going to show us the timing that's associated with the project. So down here, we've got all of our project time events. So those are going to come directly from the project, and they define the milestones that are applicable to this particular project, when we need to meet them from a timing perspective. Up on the top is where we're going to see all of our working level deliverables. So we can see here that we started the project. This yellow diamond means that we started it a little bit later than we would have planned to, but we were able to make up a lot of that time, so now we can see all of our other milestones so far have been in the green. This red line that we have on the board is going to represent today's date, so we can see that we've got this PD digital modeling milestone coming up pretty soon.
Well, that's pretty cool, but how do I know that the project manager actually updated his information, had the time to or remembered to?
Well, the great thing about this is they actually don't have to. They're not updating anything here on this particular timing chart. All this timing information is coming from where the work is actually being done. So when I walk over to my master assessment, this is the actual process that the group is walking through. So you can see we've got these different checkpoints. So this is the yellow one where we started the project a little bit later than we wanted to. We walked through this process, we created a proposal based on our answers to some of these questions. We went through, we actually submitted our proposal and it was accepted. And this first phase of the project was completed on time. So we were 1 day ahead of the completion date. If I go back into the concept verification, this is the second phase of our process. We can see that this particular date was on time. Again, the team walked through everything. We've got some evaluations that took place at this first step. So all their information was green. And then we completed our phase of the project. This one was actually 5 days early. So we're right now in the design verification phase, and we had some green items on our timing chart. So when we go over to design verification, we're going to see that first diamond that was on our timing chart is green. So we started this one 4 days before we needed to. And this is the timing milestone that's coming up here in a couple of days. So this is showing red though, because we had a group that actually just converted their information, their design standards information. So Kurt is an engineering manager here that works with the design standards.
Oh, that hot dog.
Kurt the hot dog, that's right. And then they actually converted their design standards over into knowledge packets. So here's an assessment control that they started earlier today, and it's actually showing us the progress of their work, and they're just doing their work in their assessment control, and the team board's collecting it and delivering it right to us so that we can monitor it all right here.
Well, that's pretty cool at that level, but I really need to get down into the details of the lower level assessments to really get a sense of how the project is running.
Yeah, so our team board can do that for us too. If we go over to our assessments wall, you're going to see we've got a whole bunch of different evaluations that are taking place right now in different communities. So we've got some that are built in process and haven't been sent out for evaluation yet. There's a good number of them that are currently being evaluated. Looks like we've got one that's waiting to be approved. And then we've got a few things that have already happened that have been completed. So if I want to see which communities are working on which assessment controls, I can change the configuration of my wall by using this grouping functionality. So I'm going to switch from the swim lanes being the status of the assessment control, and I'm going to actually see which communities are executing this work. So here I can see we've got information from the FMEA group. The process excellence group is doing some different things. We've got a lot of different evaluations happening in the Farbulator community. So if we can scroll down, we can see all these different evaluations that are taking place. But I can also widen the swim lane. So I know they have 14. If I want to go and say that I need to see this 3 wide, I can do that. So the team board really allows us to have a lot of different views of the project. It allows us to take the complete assessments off the wall. So it's really configurable, and it allows us to see different things in different ways. So here you can see all these different pie charts for our evaluations. Now we've got some things that haven't been done yet. We've got some things that are completed. So we really have a good top-level view of the information and kind of what the red items on our pie charts are.
So in essence, I can see the things that are going well, so I don't have to waste my time deep diving in those. But can I see the items or the details of the red items?
Yeah, so if we have red items, what we do here at Farbulator is we actually raise what we call issues. So if I go over to my issues wall, the team board is going to collect all of our issues that we have currently on the XRC 238. So do you remember our KPI in the beginning where it said we have 1 open issue?
Right.
That open issue is showing right here in this column. There was a group that actually found some pinholes that were near a slot feature on one of our Farbulators. So they're currently working on that issue. So Sean and Steve raised an issue. They work in our quality department, and their issue is just showing up right here on our team board. We also have this manufacturing request. So because we had that small slip and we're getting close to our date, we know we want to request these production parts within the next 2 weeks so that we can accommodate that minor slip. So I raised this request. I assigned it to Evan. And then I know there's a few things that we need to accomplish in order to get this request processed. So I had Vincata check with the plant to gauge the feasibility of actually producing these products in 2 weeks. Sangeeta is in the process of checking with the supplier to see if the material is going to be available. And then I threw a task in here for myself to check the progress of this in a week to make sure that everything's going as planned.
So can I see all of the project tasks?
Yeah, we can show you all the project tasks too. So all these different issues could have multiple lower level tasks that need to be completed. And if I go over to the task wall, this is going to give me all the tasks that are associated with this particular project. So we can see that it's XRC 238. That we can mouse over and we can see the issue that this task is related to. We can see who owns it, what the description of it is, where it came from. And then this target date column actually lets us set a date for when we want these tasks to be completed. And based on the completion of them, we're going to get these color codes. So we can see this first task was completed, but it was a little past the date that we wanted it completed by. So it turned yellow. The green is going to indicate things that are complete and they're on time. And then down here we've got white, so those are still haven't been completed, but they're pending, so we haven't passed the date. And we've got a couple of red items that are also haven't been complete, but they're past the date that we wanted them due. So as these task lists kind of get unmanageable, we might be able to, or we might have a large number of tasks, and we don't want to scroll up and down through all these things that have been completed. So we can also change the configuration of the wall to only show us the things that haven't been completed. So now we can really focus on what needs to get done, or at least what's upcoming if we don't have any red items. So do you remember when we were looking at the project walls, all the 2 different KPIs that we saw on the board for each project?
Yes.
So we also have a reports wall on our team board. And the reports wall is going to gather all those key performance indicators for us, and it's going to collect them right here. So we can see, here's the open issue, this is our risk score. If we've got additional key performance indicators that we want to configure, we can do that, and they'll also be collected up on this ribbon at the top. And even beyond that, if we have different reports for information that we want to track, we can store them here on the reports wall, and we can see the information in real time. So here we have a count report that's given us all the conformance states of our different assessment controls related to XRC. We've got a pie chart that does similar things. We can also see who has different issues associated with our project that are assigned to them. There's a number of different reports that we can run, and if they're important to our project, we can store them right here on our report wall so that we can see everything all at one time.
Wow, this really is a convenient way to see the overall project, to visualize it, to see the project status, and keep track of all the work that's being done. It is fantastic. And best yet, it's in real time.
It's all real time.
Fantastic.
No meetings.
Hot diggity dog. What do I do now?
Yeah, what are you going to spend your time doing?
What was demonstrated there was this idea of a team board. And the team board looks like a lot of stuff, but it really isn't. It isn't and isn't. We like doing assessments, we like knowledge packets, and we like issues, right? These are things that our customers have been doing and implementing very, very successfully without team boards for a long time. But then as we started to add the intelligence on top of it, we started to see the need that, hey, we can do something extraordinary by packaging this information up in a way that teams could better collaborate on the total sum of work on a smaller project. And we took a couple metaphors, the main metaphor being a war room, and we created a project war room in a virtual space, and we made it touch compliant, right? And so that's what a team board is. The really only new thing, new data elements that are in a team board is this idea of timing, right? Which you can turn off if you don't want to. But it's not our intention to be a program timing or project management tool, because I know you guys all have those, right? So that tool's been designed to work inside out, which is different. So what it means is that we can take in top-level program milestones from a master schedule. You got all your projects, you got a master database, I guarantee it, right? Everybody's got a master database of timing somewhere. And all your projects have to inherit timing from there, right? Does anybody don't have that? How many people have that, have a master timing schedule, right? Okay, half. Okay, so you don't want to replicate that. So our system is geared to read that, but then we have Josh called it a master method, and it looked like that flowchart again. Again, it's a knowledge packet, but it represents how the team wants to do their process. And then the Auros rules engine can then calculate dates of events that are specific to that team in the project. So let's say your project, your Farbulator has a piston group, a casting group, and they're all doing their own assessments, and their work activity is different, but they're all driving towards the same PPCS timing, job one timing. Well, now all their team dates are coming bottom up, because you can't cascade that timing all the way down. You can't start with your program timing, try to calculate the events for every single team. Maybe if you're a really small company, but as soon as you get into any level of assembly, you don't want to do that. You want the teaming, so the team, what do they do now? They have their own little Excel sheets that tell them what work tasks they should do given certain kinds of timing events. Now it can all be visual and shared in real time. So the timing thing is a little unique what we're doing, but other than that, issues, assessments, knowledge packets, we're conveniently packaging it and visualizing it and providing a bunch of analytics over the top. In the reporting engine, there's a trending tool, so you can visualize trends, you can match trends, you can have target trends, and you can do all kinds of stuff. So we don't want to be a project management tool. We really don't. You probably have those. We don't want to be the collaboration tool, but we want to replace all the Excel that teams are using because they're getting the timing goals, but then they got to track all their activity against them. And the top-down systems, PLM systems, just don't do a good job of that. But we're hoping Auros does, but only you guys can tell us. We ourselves, Auros, all of our consulting projects are done this way with a team board, assessments, knowledge packets. Our software factory is run exclusively this way. All of our enhancements, our issues, all of our milestones, our quality events, our regression testing sweeps, all done, evaluated, and visualized on team boards. We have a project for this 8 release. I'll probably show it to you tomorrow. Every activity, every enhancement, every milestone, all the glide path, lean glide path, so we know we're developing to our delivery date, all that is done through a team board and visualized that way. So hopefully it'll be as useful to customers as it was for us.
Project assessment that you showed, does that look at like Microsoft Project and
No.
pull them off?
No, we can read from a Microsoft project file, but our intention is to replace project and to tie to a database that's supplying timing, master timing, and then calculate events that are team specific against the project's timing.
So it's more off of the database of the master timing versus.
Yes, right. We've purposely designed it to integrate with a master schedule, but to create a sub-schedule that are team specific. Those were typically always in Microsoft Project, you know, and local on somebody's shared drive or those are the ones we wanted to replace and make collaborative and get so everybody can see.
So it's more of an Excel file that you would end up looking at for the master schedule from a software side?
We can read from a Microsoft Project, and we've also, in cooperation with one of our OEM friends, have developed a way to synchronize, a quite good way of synchronizing the schedules. So where there's a master schedule, we have a way to maintain synchronization with an ever-changing master set of milestones. All right, so what happens is, let's say you're a tier 1 supplier and the job 1 date moves. So the master programming tool, the system moves the date. Now all the teams changing their Excel files. Now what happens is the date gets synchronized into the master system. It cascades into Auros. The team's dates are based on a method, which are basically, you know, rules about offsets, and then their schedules that are team specific and visualized there on the Gantt chart get moved around based on the changed OEM job 1 date. That's a complicated explanation, but it's actually it's pretty straightforward. Tim. We're not doing that yet, but there's a couple things like that we got on the list that we want to accomplish. We're not really doing the critical path analysis as well as we'd like to yet either. Oh, so this is a polling question now? Okay, what other... Oh, question from the audience. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'll read it. What other measurements of project health can we view on project space other than risk score and open issues? So are we talking about on the portfolio view where all the projects are, or on the reports wall? I guess they're really the same. Okay, so we provide a library of KPIs that you can build point and click, customize for, right? And really, it's quite extensive. So you can consider counts of issues by status, by priority, by owner. You can do assessment information by owning assessment, by evaluation status, by count. You can do dimensional values. So if you have reported values like a cost factor or cost or things like that that can be reported as a parameter, you can do KPIs against that. We have milestone KPIs, missed milestones, past milestones. We'll probably do a lot more of those in the next version, but we have those kind of KPIs. What am I missing? So then there's like little tools to configure each of those kind of KPIs. You want to customize them. You only want to count issues of priority of 3 and higher, things like that, and that are open, that are more than 10 days old, or however you want to do it. And then you can take those KPIs and create custom expressions. I want that value plus that value divided by, or the average of these 5 values, and then you can assign segments of risk. This level, when that count is in the between A and B, or 10 and 20 is red, and between 20 and 25 is green, that kind of stuff. So basically, you can use the Auros rules engine to create very sophisticated evaluations of just about everything. Then you can trend that value over time and publish it on the reports wall and see that trend. Does that answer that question? We haven't done that yet. We haven't done that. So, no, the answer is no, not yet. We'd enjoy the opportunity to try. I mean, we understand FMEA. To some extent, you can do FMEAs natively in Auros. It depends on how deep you want to get into that FMEA process. Right, that's exactly why Auros is very good at it. So if you want to keep your FMEA system, we'd have to create an interface between the, but the idea is, oh yeah, it's absolutely feasible. Absolutely, it's feasible. Straightforward to do it, but a specific FEA system, we haven't done it yet. But that's the right idea, right? You want the lessons to show up where you're evaluating the failure mode. Andrea.
Sometimes knowledge is included in an Excel file. So the Excel file itself gives you a method to calculate some stresses or some forces or whatever. And that's kind of hard, or anyway, maybe not. But how do you interface Auros with Excel?
Okay. How do you interface Auros with Excel? It depends on how Excel is being used, right? So in this particular example, a single bit of knowledge is a complex set of equations spread across a spreadsheet. Okay. We've come across this many times. So to some extent, as you said, we can use systems of Kpis with value tables that replicate a very complex Excel sheet. We've done it. It works pretty well, too. What we can't do with a native knowledge packet or system knowledge packet is do something like Solver or Monte Carlo stuff. And Excel does. Excel just boggles most of our brains and some of the stuff Excel can do, right? So when you need that, that's another thing that we'd like to get to, is where we can encapsulate a spreadsheet, tie the spreadsheets to parameters, and treat it just like a value table. So in essence, the expression that you normally put in a value table is actually an Excel file behind the scenes. But its interface to the rest of the world, to CAD and everything, are parameters in a value table. So the parameters in the value table are the same. That looks just like you normally see, except for instead of putting, in the example I did here, it was the venting orifice had to be at least, or it should be 20% of the drinking orifice, right? So instead of writing that expression, the terms in that expression are just tied to name cells in a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet is kind of the mathematical model behind the scenes. That's how we want to approach it, but we don't have it yet. We haven't found too many of those examples, right? We have seen very complicated spreadsheets that did work by creating value tables, where each value table or system value tables represents a number of calculations in a spreadsheet. And then through the parameter names, it's just like linking cells. It works the same way. And then your parameter sheet becomes like the Excel sheet, where all the input parameters are here and all the things that are going to get calculated are over here and evaluated. Good questions. Got to be more questions. Okay, again, surveys. So go to the app, and again, look for the survey stuff. I think you're all familiar with it now. Look for the line item called Farbulator Enterprise as a narrative, and please tell us what you think honestly, so we can improve the experiences next year. Thank you, guys.